Everybody has a story. You got a story. You're living it out today. Your story matters more than you can possibly imagine. You just get one. Nobody gets the story they want, and that's part of what I want to talk about today. What do you do when your story gets interrupted? In little ways or in big ways? This last weekend was wonderful. The Become New team got together back in Oklahoma. We meet there maybe 3 or 4 times a year. And Brad Wright, who's a sociologist at the University of Connecticut, done a ton of research on how do you pursue meaning and purpose in your life, met with us, and we thought about that for a couple of days. Wrote down 15 different possible selves, and that idea of planning and moving towards the purpose that I would like my life to experience is such a life-giving thing. Then we went to the airport after the weekend was over to go home, but there were thunderstorms going on in Oklahoma City. I had a connecting flight that was going to go through Houston where a hurricane was landing, and the airport was just a mess, and we were completely disrupted. Nobody was able to get the flights they wanted to. 2 of the guys, Tim and Brandon, rented a car and drove from Oklahoma City to Minneapolis, Minnesota. Brandon doesn't really like flying, said he's kind of a hobbit, likes staying close to the ground. I thought this would be a good chance to practice letting go of my need to control everything. So I just sat calmly and read a book, and other people were scurrying around making arrangements. And then my flight got canceled, and on my particular airline, all the flights got canceled for several days. I won't say what airline it was, but the skies did not feel particularly friendly to me, although they all were doing the very best that they could. And I discovered that sometimes passivity is not the same thing as surrender, and it was too late by the time I was trying to make other arrangements to get out that same day. And so I had to wait for another day, get on a whole nother airline, schedule a flight that was supposed to have 3 legs by the time I got back home. Anyway, we all made it home, and it was just kind of an interesting journey and an opportunity to be reminded that I am not in control of anything, and that we all have to navigate this business of what's passivity. That's not God's will for my life. And then what's accepting things that I cannot control, because sometimes I have to do that because I'm not God. And where should I exercise agency? Part of what we learn in this is part of the story deal, is for every one of us, as you might remember, in each story, there is hero, protagonist, whatever you want to call this character. And then there is an object of desire. This is the thing that I want. That's the spine of the story. And then the protagonist always runs into barriers, conflicts within herself, himself, with other people, with powers beyond themselves, has to take a risk, more conflict than so. And we all have this object of desire all the time. And you might think right now about what is it that you want? And then we find out when things like flights get canceled, what is it that I really wanted? And of course, sometimes I discover that I'm much too attached to a particular desire that's not really worthy of it. I have to get out right now. Do I? Why? And then, of course, sometimes I'm not sufficiently attached to a desire that is noble and good and worthy of devoting a life to. And always I'm tempted by this illusion that I can be in control. And so Jesus' brother in the book of James, his brother James says, "Now listen, you who say, tomorrow we'll go to this city and do that business, spend a year, make money. Why, you don't even know what will happen tomorrow. What is your life? You're a mist that vanishes." We should say, if the Lord wills. As it is, he says, your boasting is arrogant. And the problem is not making plans. It's not a bad thing to make plans. It's folly when I forget that I'm finite and I'm not running the world. And when I'm able to release that to God and embrace and appropriately surrender to his will in a way that retains agency, that's a really good thing. But very often also when I think I'm in control, I use it in ways that are ego-driven and selfish, and I want what I want, and I'm attached to the wrong ultimate desire. I have little desires. I'd like to have this possession, or I'd like for this flight to get on time, or I'd like to... But then there's a great overarching desire in every life. Our stories are just that way. Often we don't even know what they are. And that brings me to think for a moment now about Jesus. If you were to say, what was Jesus's ultimate desire, what would you say? I was thinking when Jesus' life gets interrupted, he often handles it in quite different ways. Many, many times, his ministry seems to consist of being interrupted. So a leper comes up to him, or a Roman centurion that needs a healing in his household, or a sinful woman, or a rich young ruler, or at the beginning of his ministry, the Spirit thrusts him out into the wilderness for 40 days. And all of these interruptions, Jesus is perfectly willing to embrace. But then other times, for example, a crowd wants to come and make him king, or his family wants to come and take charge of him because they think he's crazy and they want him to stop his teaching. No way, he's not going to do that. So sometimes he's quite interruptible, and otherwise he is very determined not to be interrupted. What is the overarching object of Jesus' desire? George McDonald, great Scottish preacher and writer, poses the question like this: why did Jesus come into the world? And often people will answer with something like, well, he came to save the world. And McDonald says, no, that's part of why he came, but there was another great overarching reason that governed every moment of his life. And he names it in a variety of places. One of them is the Gospel of John, chapter 4. I think it's verse 38. He's been talking with the Samaritan woman at the well, another one of those interruptions. And the disciples know that he's hungry and they're going to bring him food. And he says, I have food that you don't know about. My food is to do the will of the one who sent me. To do the Father's will from one moment to the next. That's the ultimate object of Jesus' desire. Why? Because that will is so good. Because to do that will is better than to do anything else. Because at the heart of it is just simply love, to bring love to the God who made me and to this earth that he made and to the people around me. Now today, there are going to be things that will interrupt your life. There will be things that disrupt, things that you're not planning on. View each one from the perspective of an overall attachment. God, help me to want to do your will as I walk from one moment to the next. Now, one of the ways that I'll find out about my attachment to that is, what are the things that create anxiety or disruption in my spirit when I feel like I'm not able to get them? I'm going to read you some more words from George McDonald, tell you a little bit about his story. He grew up in a family that was remarkably educated and devoted to learning. His mom had a classical education, knew multiple languages. His father read all kinds of folks, from Charles Darwin to great poets. He had Shakespearean scholars in his family. He was going to become a pastor, but his sermons were so filled with such an expansive understanding of the love of God and the inclusivity of God that the congregation didn't like it, and they cut his salary in half. That's not a good sign when you're going to be a preacher. He ended up spending much more of his life writing. He is regarded apparently as kind of the founding father of modern fantasy literature, because he wrote books like Fantastes or Lilith or The Princess and Curdie that involved unique uses of fantasy. His sermons are just amazing. C.S. Lewis wrote about him that he considered McDonald to be his master, and that he did not know of another writer who is more continually close to the Spirit of Christ. G.K. Chesterton, J.R.R. Tolkien, Madeline L'Engle, all of these were deeply, deeply impacted by George MacDonald, who in some ways may have discovered his ultimate vocation, because what he thought was going to be his vocation, a calling to preach, was largely interrupted. This is from one of his sermons, and I'll just offer these words for you to think about right now. The care that is filling your mind at this moment, or but waiting till you lay the book aside to consume you. Now just take a moment. What is that care? Relationship problem, financial difficulty, concern about somebody in your family, failure at work. The care that's filling your mind at this moment, that need which is no real need, is a demon sucking at the spring of your life. I gotta have this. Do you object, saying, but no, you don't understand. The thing I'm worrying about is a reasonable anxiety, an unavoidable care. I ask, does it involve something you have to do at this very moment? Now, of course, if it does, then go do it. Well, no. Then you are allowing it to usurp the place of something that is required of you at this moment. The greatest thing that can ever be required of any man or woman. And what is that? To trust in the living God. When I'm meeting with the team, when I'm preaching someplace, when I'm having this meal, when I'm having this conversation, when I'm talking with you right now, when I'm at the airport, when my flight is canceled, when there's somebody sitting next to me who has a need. Interesting, when we were at that airport and everything was kind of going crazy, Paige, who's part of our team, said that she was just praying for young moms with little kids that were there. And Paige is herself a young mom, and she talked about it was kind of amazing how nice people were being to each other. And maybe part of the reason for that is because somebody was praying for that. In any moment, the great thing is to be able to trust God. What if God doesn't want me to have what I need at this moment? If He does not want you to have something you value, it is to give you instead something He values. And if I do not want what He has to give me, if you are not willing that God should have His way with you, then in the name of God be miserable, until your misery drive you into the arms of the Father. You have just this one day, you have just this one story, you have just this one grand invitation to do the will of your Heavenly Father, to trust Him in this moment. Look for Him. Look for Him in the interruptions. There's a little tractor that just got started right next to me, so I'm going to end now. But there'll be interruptions all through this day. Look for God in them. He is the Lord of the interruption. He is the author of our story.
Hey, if you enjoyed that video, be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel so you don't miss any future teachings from John Ortberg here at Become New. My name's Tim, and I'm a part of the team here. This series is all about stories. Everybody has a story, and everybody's story matters. And we want to know about your story, whether it's a story of coming to faith or a story of spiritual growth. Whatever it is, we're here for you. You can email that to us at connect@becomenew.com, or you can text it to us. You can also sign up for daily reminders whenever we drop a new video via text by texting the word BECOME to the number 855-888-0444. You can also send us prayer requests there. There's a team of us that meet to pray each weekday for viewers just like yourself. If you'd like to receive the emails that go along with each video, be sure to check that out at becomenew.com/subscribe. More than a video to watch, this is really a community to belong to, and we're so glad that you're a part of it. We'll catch you next time.